Hello and welcome back to another video and Happy New Year. I fully intended to have more content come out between the last video that I posted and this video that you're seeing today. However, I got absolutely taken out by whatever strain of flu is going around right now in the States. I am still not 100%. I definitely feel human again. If you're new here, my name is Kaylee, and I use this channel to document ways that I am making my life more intentional. I'm excited about being in year 2 of posting content. I'm excited for some things that I'm changing up to feel a little bit more aligned with where I am now, a year later after starting this channel. So if you are interested in following along with the journey, and maybe integrating some new ways to add intentionality into your life as well, please keep watching, and I'd love if you would subscribe as well. Today, we are going to go over our December budget, how things went in December, and then also our financial annual review of 2025. The reason that I'm doing this way is for a couple of reasons. One, I think breaking it up into 2 videos by the time now that I'm posting this would be too late. And number 2, I am not prepared to budget for January yet, even though we are on the 2nd of January. Because of being sick, I have not even had time to create my new spreadsheet to budget for 2026. Let's jump right in to December percentages. I'm just going to go from the top of the circle and work my way around. For miscellaneous, we have 9.1%. For cash savings, we have 37.7%, which is huge for a couple of reasons that we'll talk about when we get to the actual numbers. For groceries, we had 5.4%. Eating out was 3%, which I think is the lowest that it's been since January, maybe. Insurance was 4.3%. Rent and utilities, 20.5%. Subscriptions, 0.2%. Gas, 1%. Travel, 9.9%. Retirement and investment, or R&I savings, 8.7%. And business expenses, 0.3%. This is not at all how I expected this month to look going into the month. I expected travel to be much higher. I expected miscellaneous and eating out to be much higher. I even expected groceries to be higher, honestly, and for cash savings to be less. I also anticipated retirement and investment savings to be higher, and I actually need to talk to our financial advisor and make sure that I set all of the accounts up correctly when we set up our new investment account, because we didn't have anything pull out of our main account this month, and I anticipated that to happen. So those are kind of my reflections just looking at this pie chart. I am so thrilled to see cash savings taking up such a large chunk, and again, to not see loans on this spreadsheet any longer. If you're new here and you don't know why I'm saying that, it is because Jonathan and I, my husband and I, became completely debt-free in 2025, paid off our last student loan payment in September, and have just been working on getting our savings back up to a comfortable place, which we are well on the way to doing, especially after this month. Before we get into the actual numbers of December, I just want to kind of reflect on the month itself. Again, it was a very abnormal month, which it always kind of is, right? Because of Christmas and New Year's and that weird time in between those two things. However, it was an even more abnormal month because I was out of the country December 1st through the 12th. Jonathan was out of state December 7th through the 10th. And then he was out of town the 12th through the 14th of December. And then we had Christmas, and then we had New Year's. But from Christmas Day until New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, both of us were incredibly ill. And we are still, like I said earlier, recovering from it. And therefore, we didn't leave the house nearly as much as we typically would. Therefore, we didn't spend nearly as much money as we typically do in the month of December. Even the amounts that I budgeted for travel and groceries and eating out, we underspent the most we've underspent all year long, which is typically never true in December. December is typically one of our highest spending months, and it was actually one of our lowest spending months, all things considered. As I mentioned, I went to the Netherlands and saw my best friend and her family, and that trip really was all about being with them. My birthday did fall in that time, and I did do a couple of fun things for my birthday. I also got a massage while I was there. So there were a couple of things that happened that were fun and special for that trip. However, I wasn't doing any city to city travel, and I didn't visit any other countries while I was there, which sometimes does happen when I go to the Netherlands. Jonathan was out of town, as I said, for his grandmother's funeral. He drove up to Michigan, and we had to get a rental car and a hotel and things like that. But still, with how much we budgeted for travel, all things considered, we still came under budget, which is insane. I don't think we've ever come that much under a travel budget before. We also had some things going on in lives of our friends. One of my friends lost her mother, and so I was at her mother's viewing during December. We have another friend whose birthday is in December, and his wife is Jewish, and so we had a kind of Hanukkah birthday dinner for him, and that was really great. We had Christmas celebrations with my husband's work and the counseling team at the counseling office that I manage. And we also had my brother and his wife here after Christmas up to yesterday, New Year's Day, which was great. And it was kind of a bummer because they were still getting over sickness. We were in the middle of our sickness. We still made the most of it as best we could, but it definitely looked a lot different than I anticipated it looking when we knew that they would be in town. We also had a wedding kind of celebration for them here with people in Georgia, since their wedding was in Minnesota in November. So even with sickness and all of that, it was still a really busy month, which makes me more surprised at how under budget we came this month. Looking at the actual numbers, I am so shocked. So for groceries, based on previous years, I budgeted $600. We spent $482.43, underspending that category by $117.57. Because I inflated the grocery budget so much, eating out stayed roughly the same, around $450, which is still a little bit more than we typically budget for every month. However, we only spent $270.34, underspending that category by nearly $180. Rent and utilities is something that I knew exactly how much it was going to cost, so I budgeted that exact amount, which was $1,822.67. Subscriptions is another category that I know exactly how much it's going to be. $16.99. We only pay for Spotify. For gas, I budgeted $200. We only ended up spending $86.55, underspending that category by $113.45. And if you're wondering how that's possible with Jonathan driving to and from Michigan, that is because any gas that he spent on that trip went into our travel budget. And in that budget, I budgeted $1,200, considering I was going to be out of the country for 2 weeks. He was going to be in Michigan for 4 days and needed a rental car and needed a hotel and all of those things. However, we only spent $877.82, underspending that category by $322.18, which is huge. And I'm very grateful that we managed to still do what we needed to do on both of those trips and yet come so far under that budget. Insurance is another category. I know exactly what it's going to be. $379.64, which is exactly what we spent. Business, another category that I typically can anticipate. I budgeted $28.98. That's what we spent. And then we come to miscellaneous and personal, which is a category that I try to budget for well, and yet almost every month we get hit with some necessary but unanticipated or unbudgeted for expenses. However, this month we did a really great job, and I think part of that was not leaving the house for about 2 weeks for Christmas and New Year's. So we budgeted $900. We spent $805.56, underspending this category by $94.44. In this category, I like to break down red, yellow, and green light purchases. Green light purchases are those that we budgeted for and anticipated. Yellow light purchases are things that we did not budget for but were necessary to pay. And red light purchases are unbudgeted for and unnecessary purchases or expenses. Looking at green light category, I had some skincare that had run out that I needed to purchase. That was $44.89. We needed to get some more vitamins and supplements. That was $50 at Costco. For all of the Christmas and birthday gifts that we bought in the month of December, I just put it all into one lump sum so that it wasn't broken out by person, because I know some of my people watch these videos. So for Christmas and birthday gifts in the month of December, we spent $398.25, which, considering all that we purchased for different people, is a lot lower than I anticipated it as I was adding all of those gifts up. I thought that that was going to be much higher, and it's why we budgeted what we budgeted for this category this month. So I'm pretty thrilled with that, actually. And then $25.03 was spent at the party for my husband's work for additional drinks and things like that. And we knew that we would probably spend a little bit of money, so we did budget for that. And then $40.79 at Microsoft. There were a couple of games that we knew would be on sale in the month of December that we had been holding off on purchasing for like the past 3 or 4 months. And this month, since we don't do Christmas gifts with each other, we decided to purchase those games for ourselves. Yellow light purchases was very small. One of them I'm kind of embarrassed by, if I'm honest, and that is $25 for an overdraft fee. I have mentioned before that I like to have a month ahead expenses in our checking account, but sometimes with how certain days fall and how the transfer from our big savings account works, it takes a couple of days to land into the bank account. And I typically try to make sure that I'm overlapping those dates properly when rent is coming out and other larger bills out of our checking account. And this month, the stars did not align. The dates did not align in the way that they typically do, and therefore our account was overdrafted and we were charged a $25 fee, which is a bummer, but I'm grateful that it's not more than that, and that the money went into the account literally the day after it went into overdraft, so that we didn't have to pay any additional fees for additional bills and such that was coming out of the account the day after and a couple days after that. And then we had $66.10, which was at Target, for medicine and cleaning supplies for our illness. And then we have our red light purchases, which again, I'm actually surprised that there aren't more or that it didn't total more money. But the first one is $33.80 at a place called Paper Culture, which actually I want to talk about this business for a second. So it's called Paper Culture, and they do wedding invitations, personal stationery, Christmas cards, thank you cards, things like that. However, every purchase plants a tree. And it's quite cool the way that they do it, because on their site it says they both literally go out as a staff and plant some trees locally, and then they also use some of their funds to plant trees nationally and internationally as well. And all of their paper products are 100% recycled paper. I think they even have some like seed paper, which is very cool. But I just did a 20 card order for Christmas cards to send out to some friends and family. So while it was a red light purchase, it was very cool to come across a company with a mission that is also aligned with how I would want to spend our money in a category like that. So red light but found a cool business along the way. Then we have $21.20 to Amazon. If you're new here, I hate Amazon. If you're not new here, I'm sorry. I did this to get the ads removed on my Kindle. Long story short, I purchased a Kindle for someone for Christmas. They already got that Kindle, and so my husband has been using a first generation Paperwhite Kindle, and we made the decision for me to keep the new Kindle and for me to give him my old, even though it's much, much newer than his, Kindle. And because I was used to not having ads on there, and just to take any temptation towards Kindle Unlimited or anything like that away, $21.20 was worth it to me to pay to get those ads removed and to have my Kindle just be the books that I'm reading. Then we have $21.84 at Etsy, which is for a Kindle case for me. I had never had a case on my Kindle before, and then somehow, I don't know when this year, my Kindle got like 2 little scratches on it, and that really bothered me when I was reading it. It does not bother my husband at all, but I could not see beyond the scratches sometimes. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to get a Kindle case that'll help keep it protected. Then I have $49.08 at Target. I purchased 2 dresses and a pair of shoes. I might take one of the dresses back still. I'm unsure. Then you'll see a $2.05 fee for Kindle Unlimited. With the new Kindle, I initially didn't add Kindle Unlimited when it was going to be a gift for someone, but for me, I would want Kindle Unlimited for the 3 months for free. So I contacted Amazon and I said, hey, I purchased this. However, now it's not giving me the option for free months of Kindle. Can I do that, somehow? And they said, sure, what we'll do is we will refund you $36, which would cover the months of Kindle Unlimited. And I was like, sure, I'll take a $36 refund. They ended up only refunding me like $34 and some cents, which is why I'm putting $2.05 down for Kindle Unlimited to cover that extra amount that wasn't refunded, but is not worth me trying to chat with Amazon again. Then we have $15.60 at USPS, which was for stamps to mail our Christmas cards and for stamps to mail some of my friends' Christmas cards from the Netherlands that needed to go out to friends in the States. And finally, we have $11.93 at Cobb Antique Mall. This was for a handmade pottery mug that I love so much. My husband actually found it, sent me a picture of it, and I was like, yes, please buy that. That concludes the amount spent for miscellaneous and personal. So looking at the month's budget, we budgeted $5,598.28, but we only spent $4,770.98. So that's underspending the budget in total by about $830, meaning that in cash, we saved from income to expenses almost $3,400, which is insane and not the norm. But I'm very grateful to have ended the year that way because that really, really helped our overall income to expenses and amount that we saved. So now that we have wrapped up December, I want to look at 2025 as a whole. I'm also going to share a little bit of differences between 2024 and 2025 because in 2024, I think we kind of talked about a no buy or a low buy, and looking at the amount we spent on non-essentials, red light purchases, different experiences and things, and the amount that we paid on our loans, we technically failed our low buy or no buy in 2024. Now, I wouldn't trade some of the experiences and things that we did in 2024, but I do wish that we had been a little bit more disciplined because 2025 would have looked slightly different from a savings perspective if we had done that in 2024. So 2025, we definitely went into it with the mindset of a low buy or no buy. However, the main goal of 2025 was to become debt free. And to become debt free, we had about $18,000 that still needed to be paid off, which is significantly more than we paid off in 2024. However, we did pay almost $13,000 in 2024 towards Jonathan's graduate degree. So there was definitely some things that we did that didn't accrue more debt, but we did dip into our savings a lot more in 2024. And that's something that we wanted to stay away from as much as possible in 2025, to not let our cash savings go below the threshold that makes us feel comfortable. There were also some things in the way that we budgeted in 2024 that did not set us up for success in really recognizing how much our income was and how much our actual expenses total was. And therefore, when I sat down, and the first video I ever filmed was, did we fail our no-buy in 2024? And I was actually shocked at the amount of savings that we did not have in 2024. To give you a little bit of a recap of that, we had a negative savings of $7,858. And I was shocked by that at the end of the year because of how I had done our budget spreadsheet, which is why I went into 2025 doing quarterly check-ins as well, both filmed and for myself, because of that reason. I was blindsided by that number, and I did not want to be blindsided by a number again. So I feel a lot more aware. I wasn't really shocked or surprised by any of our numbers this year, but I was very shocked and surprised by the difference between 2024 spending and 2025 spending. And the reason that I'm sharing this is because it really goes to show, when you are really connected to your why and you are excited and passionate about the goal that you have set for yourself, it's so much easier for certain things to come into alignment with that goal versus trying to fight against something or not being as passionate about achieving what you're setting out to achieve. And I think that's really important going into the new year in general, is to recognize that while we can set tons of different resolutions and goals and have all of these different things that we want to integrate into our life because a new year happened, if we're not passionate about it, and if we didn't really hammer down why it was happening, what specifically that goal looked like, and what that goal could kind of shake up and make change in the rest of your life, it's going to be really hard to make any progress towards it. And it's going to be really hard to be excited about any progress towards it if it has negative or adverse effects that you may not have anticipated. So going into 2025, our main goal was to become debt free. And therefore, when we were budgeting and when we were spending money, we set out with that mindset and then tried to stay within that as much as possible. And if you're not new here, and if you've seen other budgeting videos, you'll know that we went over budget a lot of months. We went over budget in multiple categories in some months. And yet, this year, we actually became debt-free. We paid off $18,000 in 1 year, and we still had a cash savings of $9,915, which is insane. And oh my gosh, I'm so grateful for that, because I don't know what we would have done if our cash savings didn't grow with how much we paid on student loans and having to also pay one payment of like $4,300 for his final semester in grad school. There were a ton of expenses this year, and we did have an increase in income the second half of the year, which was incredibly helpful in all of this. But also, we changed our habits and we changed our mindset when it came to spending money to help us achieve this goal. I want to show you the overall pie chart for 2025 and all of the different percentages for all of the different categories. The only thing that you won't see on here is retirement and investment savings, because I started doing that the last 2 months of the year in our budget spreadsheet, and it was going to take way too much time for me to go backwards and try to catch up from the whole year. So going forward, it will be something that I am tracking. So starting at the top and moving our way around, just like we do every month, we have taxes, 2.5%, cash savings, 11.5%, groceries, 4%, eating out, 4.6%, insurance, 4.7%, rent and utilities, 21.3%, subscriptions, 0.2%, gas, 1.7%, travel, 8.5%, loan repayment, 20.8%, business, 1.4%, miscellaneous, 11.9%, grad school, 4.9%, and red light purchases, 2%. Now you might be wondering that red light versus miscellaneous. What I did was I took all of our red light purchases for the entire year and added them up and subtracted them from the total miscellaneous amount for the entire year to get those separate numbers, because I wanted to see what we spent specifically on red light separately from miscellaneous, which was a combination of green, yellow, and red light purchases. So miscellaneous could also be seen as green and yellow light, and then obviously red light is its own category. Now, I'm not going to do a breakdown of all of the actual numbers for each category, but what I will do is tell you some of the differences between 2024 and 2025 spending in some of these categories. So in groceries, in 2025, we spent $1,110 less than we spent on groceries in 2024. For eating out, we spent $2,500 less in 2025 on eating out than we spent in 2024. For insurance, we spent $560 less in 2025 than in 2024. And that, I think, is important because we saw a huge increase in our insurance at like the second half of 2024. And therefore, I went to our insurance agent and asked him to shop around for us again to see if we qualified for anything lower that still had the same coverage or higher than the coverage that we had with our previous policy. And he found something, and we ended up saving $560 because of doing that in the end of 2024 for 2025. So if your insurance premium starts to increase, definitely reach out to your or a insurance agent to have them shop around for you, because it's possible that there are policies that are less money for the same great coverage that you have under your current policy. And it's actually really easy to switch insurances when you have an agent kind of doing all of that work for you. Rent and utilities. If you'll remember, in 2024, in July, we moved from a 2-bedroom house that we were renting to a 1-bedroom apartment to try and save money, because that was like the only way that we were going to be able to save money in the rent and utilities category. So even though in 2024, we lived in this apartment for half the year, for 2025 in total, we spent $6,685 less on rent and utilities than we spent in 2024. So if you ask me, the move was totally worth it. And the thing that I miss most about that place was having a small backyard for our dog, but a small backyard for the dog, or almost $6,700 back into our pocket. I'm going to take the $6,700 and just make sure that the dog gets walked more frequently. Gas was another category that we had a little bit less going out in 2025 than in 2024. We spent $485 less on gas in 2025, despite gas prices being higher this year. For business, that was another category that changed quite a lot, because in 2024, I was doing a lot of in-person networking and therefore doing a lot of one-to-one meetings at restaurants or coffee shops that often produced no result. And so therefore in 2025, I got a lot more specific with the type of people and the type of networking that I was doing. And therefore I spent $1,677 less on my business than in 2024, and I made more money in 2025 than I did in 2024. And finally, the last category that I kind of want to highlight the difference between is our red light purchases. In 2024, and it's probably not even the most comprehensive number because of the way that I had the spreadsheets done in 2024, but in 2025, we spent $1,800 less on red light purchases than in 2024. And the reason that I'm sharing these categories specifically, groceries, eating out, insurance, rent, utilities, gas, business, kind of business. For me, it's qualifies the same. For you, it might not. And red light purchases is because all of those are not fixed expenses. Rent and utilities definitely can be, but utility bills can sometimes be negotiated. The price that you're paying per unit or therm for your gas and electricity can be negotiated sometimes. Your rent can change if you move, which does sometimes come with some expenses initially, but you might save $6,000 over the course of a year compared to previous years. Groceries and eating out aren't fixed expenses. They are expenses that have to happen, but you can definitely change the way that you budget for them and that you utilize that money budgeted to have those categories cost less over time. And to me, seeing the amount of difference between 2024 and 2025 is a direct reflection of alignment with the goal of paying off $18,000 in a year. Because we did it. It happened. And that is an incredible achievement for us. Your achievement might look much smaller. It might seem much bigger and more daunting. But making small tweaks in lifestyle and bills and things like that help to save some money over time to pay off something like a student loan or a car loan or a credit card bill. And so I'm grateful that this year we, as my brother would say, locked in and made our goals happen and also stayed super aligned to the life that we want to live. Spending less on groceries and eating out doesn't mean that we felt like we were going without at any time. It meant that we were a lot more intentional with where and how we spent our money. There was also a lot less waste, I think, going on with groceries this year. And eating out, we just went to places that we know we like rather than trying a bunch of different places and paying for meals that actually weren't that great. We had very different priorities in the way that we spent our money this year, and it shows in how we budgeted and how we saved. So my advice to you going into a new year is to make sure that your goals are something that you are passionate about seeing completed and are willing to do what it takes to get to those goals versus making some lofty goal that is unachievable and then feeling more and more discouraged along the way of trying to meet that goal, but never feeling like you're making any progress. And then whatever the bigger goal is, break it down into smaller goals over every month or every quarter to see if you can make that progress happen on a smaller scale as well. One number that I was actually slightly surprised by was our monthly average, and I've never looked at this before, but going into a new year and having specific savings automatically coming out of our account, I was curious if I'm even budgeting appropriately for how much we've been spending looking back at 2025. So our monthly average was $58.75, so $5,875, which was a lot higher than I anticipated and is a lot higher than I think 2026 will go because we did have some really big spend months when we purchased our new couch, for example, when we paid for Jonathan's last graduate semester, which was like $4,300 in a month. So I think that there were some things that skewed this a little bit higher, but that is really good for me because I think about our budget and I'm like, oh, like between 43 and 4,500 should be enough every month. And that might be true. However, looking at our monthly average of $58.75, maybe I increase that to like $4,500 to $4,800 and see if we're able to stay within that amount on our average months where we don't have any travel or any kind of extenuating expenses that are at play in our miscellaneous and personal category. And talking about all of this has me very excited to start budgeting for January and to get our spreadsheet set up for the year of 2026. But I am going to take a little bit of time to do that over the next couple of days, and hopefully we'll check in and budget with you just a little later. But I'm also trying to remember that I am not as motivated by a new year as I used to be, and going into goal planning and thinking about the year to come, I prefer to be a little bit slower and to do over the course of January and then really start in February versus trying to think about those things while the craziness of Christmas and New Year's is going on to try and start January 1st. And then if you don't start January 1st, you already feel behind. Instead, January 1st is kind of the jumping off point to start to do more of that inventory and looking back and looking ahead, at least for me personally. So hopefully that is helpful for you and you will be looking forward to some of that content coming out over the next couple of weeks. I have so many ideas that I was hoping to get filmed at the end of the year that didn't happen because of illness. So those will slowly start to trickle out over the next couple of weeks. I may have some weeks where I have 2 or 3 videos come out just to try and get those out as they remain most relevant to those of you watching. If you have anything that you would like to see from me in 2026, please let me know down in the comments. It is so helpful to have feedback and to hear what you are excited about, learning more about, seeing in day-to-day life, etc., etc. So I would love if you would do that in the comments below. Have a lovely weekend if you're watching this when this comes out, and I will see you in another video soon. Until next time.